How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I'm delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be happy to have you. Don't forget to text the word Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. And if you are listening to me in Middle Georgia on WMAC, my local station where I am now, you got slightly less than an hour to get to the polls and vote and stop the far-left Democrat from winning. I'm voting for Stephen McNeil. You should too, in State Senate District 18 here in Georgia. And yes, for those of you listening in Sacramento, Connecticut, Alaska, I realize it doesn't matter to all of you, but listen, I'm trying to stop a commie from getting elected in a Republican district, and the Republicans aren't showing up. So I got a microphone. I'm abusing the privilege on my show today for this. I really wouldn't want to be represented by a communist in the state legislature in a district that's 60-40 Republican, but the Republicans simply are not showing up. It's just, I don't know what the Republican Party does these days in terms of getting people out to vote. The Democrats literally rented 15-passenger vans to get people to the polls. I'm getting messages from Stacey Abrams today thinking that she's got my wife's phone number, urging all women in Middle Georgia to get out to vote. The Working Families Party's been sending text messages and written buses to get Democrats to early voting. And what do the Republicans do? Fight amongst each other. It's just crazy. All right. We have to talk about progressive monoculture. You know what monochromatic is? Monochromatic, you don't have the vibrancy of color. Monochrome means a picture that is executed in black and white, maybe varying tones of just one color. It is a uniformity. A monoculture is a culture that is the same everywhere. We in our nation in the 50s and 60s, in the 70s, we kind of had a monoculture. Everybody kind of watched the same TV shows. In the 80s, the early 90s, it was the Cosby Show. Everybody loved the Cosby Show. Everybody back in the day, everybody loved Bill Cosby. As long as they didn't drink out of his cup, everybody loved Bill Cosby. Music, everybody kind of had the same musical taste. My wife is an 80s music nut. Y'all, my son believes music stopped after about 1850. My wife believes music stopped in 1990. The moment we hit the 90s, that's the moment my music came alive. I'm an alt-rock guy. I grew up overseas, obviously. My sisters were big into 80s pop, Michael Jackson and Rick Springfield and Bryan Adams. And my wife loves Prince. My sisters love Prince. Nirvana started my taste in music, followed very quickly by Pearl Jam. I have somewhat eclectic music tastes. I do. But it is mostly modern rock, alternative. Been listening to a lot of Matt Mason lately. Mumford & Sons, I love. Pearl Jam, I can never get enough of Pearl Jam. My gosh, Smashing Pumpkins. I just saw Smashing Pumpkins did a cover with Youngblood the other day. I've been listening to that. Look, I got tastes probably for someone younger than me, but it is for me classical music and modern rock, alternative. My son, I'm not kidding. He believes that when the classical music era ended, that's when music ended. He listens to Queen. My son is a big Drew Holcomb fan. He listens to Johnny Cash. He's a big Queen fan. My son loves classical music. Bach, Beethoven, Chopin is one of his favorites. When we take road trips together, my son wants to listen to classical music intermixed with Freddie Mercury and Johnny Cash and Drew Holcomb. Mostly, though, it's Bach and Beethoven and Chopin, a little Paganini thrown in there. He's got a little opera. He likes Pavarotti. 17 years old. His taste in music is as eclectic as mine. But in the 80s, in the 70s, the 80s, we had really three news channels, four if you count PBS, ABC, CBS, NBC. Then you got Fox. Fox in the 90s, you had Beverly Hills 90210 back in the day. Fox was kind of the brazen new network everywhere. And monoculture started to break apart now. Some people like The Simpsons. You had people watching Dallas. My buddy John Hansen the other day, John Hassan, I texted him something. And it was a picture of J.R. Ewing. I said, your parents will understand this. And he texted me back and says, I have no idea who this is or what this means. I was like, oh, my God, I'm old. Shut up, Philip. You two are the same age. And neither of you know Dallas. When J.R. Ewing was shot, everyone in America wanted to know who shot him. In fact, the cliffhanger ending of Dallas was something very new to American television. Who shot JR? And then they went into summer reruns. Yes, kids, there was a time we had 3 TV channels, and in the summer, they repeated the episodes that had aired from August to May in those 3 months. It was kind of wild. And then you got to tune back in to Who Shot JR. The downside is we came home for the summer after JR got shot and then went back to the Dubai. We had to wait a whole nother year to figure out who JR was shot by. It was his cousin or something. In any event, we had monoculture. The Democrats today have monoculture, and it's a problem for the Democrats. Listen, when HBO started doing The Sopranos, TV was broken. You could pay money to HBO and get better TV than anything CBS, ABC, or NBC or Fox had. It was more in-depth. It was better drama. It could be more violence. There could be more sex, more language, but the scripting was good because there were no commercials. You didn't have to work around commercial breaks, and people loved it, and The Sopranos took off. Game of Thrones, you name it. Forget the last season of Game of Thrones. That was the biggest cultural event, but it really divided people behind pay TV and people who don't. Football has been a great unifier in this country, but the networks and the NFL, they're so greedy now, it's almost impossible for everybody to watch a football game because you got to have the right streaming service at the right time and hold your leg up one way and turn your head just so to get the Wi-Fi going to be able to get it on. But around the world, we have more and more cultural divisions, and that's part of what divides the country right now. But among the Democratic Party these days, you have a monoculture where the policy positions from California to now Virginia are the same. The Virginia Democrats have now taken over the state legislature, the governor's mansion, the lieutenant governor's position, and the attorney general's position, and they are moving as rapidly as possible to transform Virginia into California, Minnesota, New York. It's actually kind of weird. These are not the policies of Virginians. These are the policies of the National Progressive Movement in Virginia. And it's a warning to other states like my own here in Georgia, as Democrats seem resurgent, that you're not going to get the policies of Georgia Democrats. You're going to get the policies of the National Progressive Movement. In Virginia today, they are moving to make abortion until the moment of birth the law of the land and amend the Constitution. In Virginia today, they're getting rid of the mandatory minimums for rape, child abuse, child molestation, child pornography, battery, robbery. There will be no more mandatory minimums in Virginia. They're getting rid of them. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, is pulling out of environmental groups that have restricted the ability of Pennsylvania to produce natural gas. Virginia's Governor Abigail Spanberger, the new Democratic governor of Virginia, is putting Virginia into the very compromise pack that the governor of Pennsylvania has pulled Pennsylvania out of, even as Pennsylvania is pretty Democrat these days. In Virginia today, the Democrats in Virginia are going to pass legislation to allow boys into girls' sports. They will shut down any opposition to trans sports. In Virginia today, they will advance projections for the trans community. In Virginia today, they're also going to raise taxes. They're going to raise taxes on Amazon purchases and FedEx deliveries and UPS deliveries. The Virginia Democrats have a major budget surplus thanks to the fine stewardship of Glenn Youngkin, the outgoing Republican governor, and they're going to raise massive taxes today. Despite no revenue need, Virginia's about to raise a bunch of taxes because they know what's coming. It's going to be a people's socialist paradise in Virginia, and the welfare spending of the state is going to skyrocket. The policies you're getting today from Virginia, which is a pretty diverse state, and a swing state still at the state level, not so much at the federal level. The policies you're getting are the policies of Gavin Newsom's California. They're the policies of Tim Walz's Minnesota. They're the policies of J.B. Pritzker's Illinois. They're the policies of Kathy Hochul's New York. They are the policies of a Democratic progressive monoculture. It is pro-trans, anti-business, anti-small business, pro-criminal, pro-illegal alien. They're legislating today in Virginia. They will stop cooperating with ICE, and state police officials and local police officials will no longer be able to cooperate with ICE. It's a monoculture. Now, I want you to think about this. In Texas, in Oklahoma, in Georgia, in Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, there are fights over tort reform and how far to go with tort reform. There are arguments over school choice and how far to go with school choice. There are arguments over restrictions on abortion. There are arguments over the tax code, whether it should be flat or fair or progressive or no income tax and just a sales tax. You go to a variety of Republican states in the union and you get a diversity of public policy ideas. You get a diversity of opinion. Not only that, you're far more likely to find a pro-trans rights Republican than you are an anti-trans rights Democrat. You're far more likely to find a pro-abortion Republican than a pro-life Democrat. You're far more likely to find a pro-gay marriage Republican than a pro-traditional marriage Democrat. Democratic monoculture has just crept in. Regardless of where you are in the nation, the Democrats want the same high tax policies, pro-trans policies, pro-illegal alien policies, anti-law enforcement policies, anti-family policies, anti-homeschooling policies. If Republicans are for it, they're against it. You find far more diversity in the Republican Party right now intellectually. And the Democrats, they really get mad when you say it, but they know it's true. That's why they get mad at you. The Democratic Party in Virginia took over power, yesterday, day before yesterday? And they are rushing right now to transform the state of Virginia into a socialist paradise akin to California. They're adopting laws and policies that Washington, Oregon, California, Minnesota have all adopted to make those states very progressive. And it's Republican states where you're having substantive arguments over should we have an income tax or have a sales tax? Should we give tax refunds to people? In Georgia, my governor wants to give big tax rebates to people. We have a very well-balanced budget. Virginia has a very well-balanced budget, but instead of refunding money to people, they're about to raise taxes because they intend to spend all the money. You've got better bond ratings now in a lot of these states. Virginia will not have as good a bond rating in the future, given the way they're going. They had a great one because Glenn Youngkin was in charge. Not anymore. The monoculture of the Democratic Party makes it easier to nationalize races against the Democratic Party excess. Now, they want to nationalize races against Trump, and it's probably going to help the Democrats in 2026, except they're becoming so radical so quickly, and they're doing it in so many states, it could very legitimately prompt a big backlash. It really, really could prompt a big backlash. It probably should. It's just very interesting to me how much policy differentiation you get between Republican states. And now Virginia is showing us that there is a uniform policy position on a host of things for Democrats. And whether you are in Virginia or all the way across the country in California, it's the same policy prescription for all the people, which suggests the Democrats are not actually representing the voters of their states. They're representing the national progressive donor class that has put Democrats in power across the nation. Hello. How are you? 877-973-7425 is the number. Text ERICK, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the show notes. Get the podcast. Get the 4 things to know this afternoon. Get the social media links. I'm just going to tell you this is CNN, and I play this clip specifically because it's not Fox News. This is CNN.
Her shift beyond dramatic. A DeSantis, then a Haley voter, said she would vote for Joe Biden if Trump won the Republican nomination. But she changed her mind.
I think Biden probably changed me more than Trump. I think watching nothing be done, for 4 years about an open border, and I think that actually pushed me further to the right, to want more law and order, to want stricter borders, and to want more control over this country.
John King, my friend, interviewing this voter in Iowa who has shifted to the right because of the border situation. Democrats look at the Renee Good situation and they say this is like Kent State all over again. There were multiple Democrats who said this is like Kent State. They gunned down people at Kent State. The nation went overwhelmingly for the Republicans after that because progressives so went insane and so overplayed their hand that there was a massive backlash against progressives. I got to tell you, when you've got the governor and the attorney general and the mayor in Minnesota defending people storming into or being quiet about people storming into a church service on a Sunday, I don't think that plays well. As much as people are upset about Renee Good, they understand the tense situation. She did hit the officer. They've been under assault. I don't know that a lot of progressives realize or even care that ICE agents have been fired at around the country. Twice in two different places in Texas, out in Oregon and elsewhere, people attempted to gun down ICE agents. It's a very high-tense situation. That's separate from not only people storming into a house of worship, but then defending it and saying they're just exercising their First Amendment rights. You don't get to storm into a house of worship on a Sunday while they are worshiping and shut down the church service and harass the people in the church. You don't get to do. That's not your right to do. Your right to your free expression stops at my right to my freedom of worship. And the left just doesn't care anymore, and there will be a law and order backlash like this lady who has drifted further right. Now, Old Glory Bank is a bank that has the back of conservatives. They were actually started because progressives buy up shares in banks and then use their shareholder clout to tell banks, you can't do business with these people. You can't do business with gun stores. You can't do business with gun manufacturers. You can't do business with conservative radio show hosts. You can't do business with conservative businesses and Christian crisis pregnancy centers, stuff like that. So Old Glory Bank started and said, well, you come do banking with us, and we're going to protect your right to bank with us. And they have. And I started using them about 2 years ago. oldglorybank.com/Eric. You can use them as well. By conservatives for conservatives. But it's not just conservatives. It's businesses around the country. It's individuals. It's veterans, first responders. If you're active duty military, you can get premium accounts. They'll waive some fees. They're a great bank, oldglorybank.com/Eric. They may be an online bank, y'all, but they've worked very hard with their app and their services so you feel like you have a local bank. You can even deposit cash at 88,000 retail locations around the country, and it gets straight into your Old Glory Bank account. I've used that myself. It works. oldglorybank.com/Eric, ERICK. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Friends, wherever you are in the United States, keep an eye on the weather, particularly if you're east of the Mississippi. You're going to get some really awful weather. I was on WHIO in Dayton, Ohio this morning with Larry Hanskin, and he said it was 5 degrees at the time. Single digits in Dayton, Ohio, and it's going to get worse. In fact, it is my mom's birthday this weekend, and after the show on Friday, I was supposed to fly over to Louisiana for her birthday, and I can't go because they're expecting a pile of snow down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And my parents live out in the country north of Baton Rouge, and I looked, and at first they said it was going to be a couple inches of snow, and then it was going to be rain. It's like I can still go over, and now they're thinking it's going to be a lot of snow. And in Atlanta, Georgia, on Sunday, it's supposed to be ice, multiple inches of ice. In fact, I was told very reliably by someone who works for Delta that the odds of me being able to get back on Sunday morning on my flight are slim to none. And just looking at the weather forecast for Atlanta, the amount of sleet and ice that will be pouring over Atlanta. So keep an eye on the weather, please. Now, for everybody, today Today is the beginning of the second term for Donald Trump, or second year of Donald Trump's term. Let's start over, shall we? Today is the beginning of the second year of Donald Trump's second term. On this day, 365 days ago, Donald Trump was sworn in as President of the United States. For you progressives who are having a neurological breakdown because this man is president, you have 1,096 more days to go with this man as your president of the United States. And not a day goes by, particularly lately as I've criticized the president on Greenland and stuff. A bunch of Democrats keep asking me, well, aren't you sorry? Aren't you going to repent? Aren't you going to acknowledge you made a mistake and you should have voted for Kamala Harris? You know, to understand a lot about Donald Trump, you don't have to assess how bad he is. You've got to appreciate just how bad all the other alternatives are to understand why so many people voted for Donald Trump. People like me who regularly criticize him. I'm not the biggest Trump fan. He knows it. We've had these conversations that I appreciate much of what he does, but there are times he does things and I'm like, will you please stop, sir? This isn't helpful. But given the choice between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, I would go back, and if I could vote twice for the man, I would. Because the Supreme Court still matters. And Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito, I'm expecting them to decide to step aside at the end of the Supreme Court term. And would I rather have Donald Trump or Kamala Harris pick their replacement? Donald Trump 7 days a week, maybe twice on Sunday. Yeah, it matters. You people who hate Donald Trump don't understand how much so many of us really hate the other side even more. You people who excuse invading churches for protest, you people who want to put boys in girls sports, you people who want to let our borders be open and have criminals flood this country and deny it's happening, you people who couldn't care less that Laken Riley was murdered by an illegal alien. You were propping up in sanctuary cities the illegal aliens. I have lots of reservations, concerns, and problems with Donald Trump, and I'm willing to call him out and criticize him, but you people won't open your mouth a single time to criticize the Democrats. You never criticize the Democrats. You expect the rest of us to just criticize Donald Trump. You can't understand why any of us would vote for him. We're voting for Donald Trump because you people are awful. Your policy prescriptions are terrible. And I think some of you are probably controlled by demons, those of you justifying storming into churches. Too many of your policy prescriptions would be bad for the country. And when it comes to Supreme Court picks, you're absolutely right. I would vote for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris again. Do I care for the guy? I criticize him often. And again, makes me far more intellectually honest than many of you who are lecturing me who don't say jack about the Democrats ever. You just want to blast Donald Trump and get on your moral high horse and preen about how righteous you are. You're not righteous. You're excusing people storming into churches, and you're perfectly fine with the Attorney General of Minnesota justifying it. There's no outrage from you that a Attorney General, Chief Law Enforcement Officer of a state, is defending people storming into a house of God to harass the people worshiping there. And you find ways to excuse it. So screw you when you come to lecture me on voting for Donald Trump. Speaking of the Supreme Court, we have another day in a reminder of how stupid Ketanji Brown Jackson is. They had a Second Amendment case today. Hawaii and a number of other states have passed laws that prohibit concealed carry gun owners from carrying guns or having guns anywhere on them or in their vehicle when they pull up at a location that doesn't allow guns. It's public access, but you're not allowed to have your gun. Treats the Second Amendment as a second-class right. You pull into the gas station to get gas, your gun is in your glove box, you're breaking the law in these states. At issue today was something called the Black Codes. When the southern states were coming back into the union, a lot of them, as black people were becoming citizens and getting the right to vote, passed what they called the Black Codes, which essentially made the slaves again, even though slavery was banned. They didn't have access to the rights of the American Constitution, and they were unconstitutional laws. The southern states passed them. And ultimately, the Supreme Court said, no, this is unconstitutional. You can't have these laws. For a time, the laws existed in the South. It took a little while to build up the cases and the case structure and the legal body of the 14th Amendment to be able to go to court and say these are unconstitutional, but they started falling. The black codes, they called them. It was at issue today in this case in the Supreme Court about people's ability to carry firearms in houses of worship, among other things. This is the original exchange with Neil Gorsuch.
There's been some discussion about the black codes, and maybe they should be relevant, and maybe we really should consider them as significant here. In fact, they're a dead ringer. Thoughts?
It is 2026, and it is somewhat astonishing that black codes, which are unconstitutional, are being offered as evidence of what our tradition of constitutionally permissible firearm regulation looks like. Those laws are dead ringers only in the sense that this law, too, is an unconstitutional pretext. The black codes were offered, as you mentioned, by states before their readmission to the Union. It is not an indictment of the Bruin framework to say that unconstitutional laws do not count in illuminating a valid tradition. As Bruin and Rahimi themselves say, you're looking for laws that aren't outliers. They illustrate what the national tradition entails. And so it is no indictment, but frankly, an endorsement of our history and tradition that when you look at the founding era laws, they are very different from the black codes, and that these black codes themselves are complete departures from what the laws in Louisiana and other states were like before, which was to allow people to presumptively go about in public on property open to the public without consent.
Now, let me explain this to you if you're not a lawyer. In states around the country, the Bruin case is the case that says the Second Amendment applies to individuals like all the other rights in the Bill of Rights. You got to look at the historic pattern of legislation in the country. What the people who argue in support of these laws that restrict the Second Amendment do is say, well, the black codes were part of our American legal tradition, and the black codes restricted black people from carrying firearms into locations that were otherwise accessible to the public. Well, the black codes were unconstitutional, and it's actually very well settled that you don't look to unconstitutional laws to determine what was the national tradition. You don't look to things that were illegal to say this was acceptable. You don't look to things that were unconstitutional to say it's constitutional. And yet here comes the idiot Ketanji Brown Jackson doing just that, to claim that we should look to the black codes to decide that it should be illegal to carry a firearm in places because the black codes historically did that. Listen to this.
Justice Jackson?
So I guess I really don't understand your response to Justice Gorsuch on the black codes. I mean, I thought the black codes were being offered here under the Bruin test to determine the constitutionality of this regulation. And it's because we have a test that asks us to look at the history and tradition. The fact that the black codes were at some later point determined themselves to be unconstitutional doesn't seem to me to be relevant to the assessment that Bruin is asking us to make. So can you say more about that?
Absolutely. Black codes were unconstitutional from the moment of their inception because they are pretextual laws that are designed to ensure that newly freed slaves are returned to a condition of sharecropping.
Okay, let me stop you there. They were not deemed unconstitutional at the time that they were enacted. They were part of the history and tradition of the country. And when we have a test now that's asking us to look at what people were doing back then, I don't understand why they should be excluded.
Because they are outliers. They are by definition unconstitutional. They have
Found later, afterwards, not at the time. And if the test says what's happening at the time tells us what's constitutional for this purpose, why aren't they in?
Respectfully, a law is always unconstitutional. When it's from its inception,
so the history doesn't matter. We shouldn't care about the history then.
We should deeply care about the history, but the whole point of the Bruin framework is as follows. The history and tradition of the Second Amendment are particularly important because it is codifying a pre-existing right. To figure out in sort of common law fashion what the national history and tradition are, you throw out outliers. And I can think of no greater outlier than blatantly unconstitutional laws that flipped what had been the tradition in states like Louisiana. And during the period before those states were readmitted to the Union, for the purpose of trying to reduce newly freed slaves back to conditions of servitude, made it a new crime, new trespass, in order to go about armed on private property. Those are obvious outliers that should not count under the whole point of Bruin.
Ketanji Brown Jackson is an idiot. You understand that Ketanji Brown Jackson is saying that these laws were part of the history of our country, so shouldn't we consider them? And the Solicitor General is like, no, because they were declared unconstitutional. You don't look to things thrown out by this court as part of our history because those things were determined to be bad. This woman is just trying to find a way. I mean, she's willing to recognize the legitimacy of the Black Code that would put her in servitude in order to stop people from exercising their Second Amendment right. Now we get to Sam Alito, who brings some clarity to this entire discussion.
You're just relegating the Second Amendment to second-class status. I don't see how you can get away from that. If someone owns a store, or let's say it's a little restaurant, and this person has very strong political opinions and does not want anybody in that restaurant who is wearing attire that is expressing approval of a particular political candidate, that person, the owner of that restaurant, has the right to say, you can't come in, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, could Hawaii enact a statute that says that if you are wearing the attire expressing approval of a particular political candidate, you can't come in unless you get express consent from the owner of the restaurant?
Again, that's a viewpoint discrimination and prohibited.
It's a violation of the First Amendment. We have a violation of the First Amendment and a violation of the right that the court held is protected by the Second Amendment in Bruin, which is the right of law-abiding citizens to carry a firearm for purposes outside of the home for purposes of self-defense.
I quite agree with much of what you're saying. I think what's the difference is that the Second Amendment, it's not a second-class right. It just doesn't have the same components of viewpoint discrimination or anti-discrimination for the 14th Amendment. That's just not in the Second Amendment. And I think the key point here is the court, if you accept my friend's invitation, you for the first time would be saying there is some sort of right here which no commentators recognize, no treatise has recognized, no court has ever recognized. Compare this to Bruin, in which you had St. George Tucker, you had many state decisions in the 18th and 19th centuries that said laws like the New York one.
Now, to get to the sense of the argument before the court today, what the laws say is that you have to get express permission to come on the property, as opposed to you just get to come on the property unless they ask you to leave. Now, if a store owner says we don't want you on our property with a gun, it should be their right. But what the laws are saying is that the state says you're not allowed to go to any public property without first getting the consent of the individual who owns the property if you have a firearm, which is not something that I think is constitutional. It does not sound like the Supreme Court is going to go along with these laws. The left keeps trying to rein back in the Second Amendment, try the progressive states are. It just tie into Old Glory Bank. One of the reasons Old Glory Bank was started was because progressives did not want banks to do business with firearm manufacturers or gun stores. And they also wanted to restrict your right to be able to buy a gun with a debit card. In fact, there are a number of banks that will not let you buy a gun with a debit card because Progressive pushed them to. Started Old Glory Bank. They wanted to protect people who were Second Amendment advocates. This is now what the states of Hawaii and these other states are doing, is saying you have your Second Amendment right, you can carry your gun, but you've got to get the express permission of someone else, the gas station owner, the restaurant, whatever. You have to get their express permission to be able to have your gun on their property, or you're going to jail, which is a way to curtail the Second Amendment through the back door. And it doesn't sound like the conservatives are going to let them get away with it, thankfully. Don't look at your 401k today. It'll be fine. It's going to go back up. But the markets really don't like the president's handling of the Greenland situation today, and they're reacting. The bond yields are going up. It's going to impact mortgage rates. They're going to go up. He's got to find a better way. I want to ask a small prayer request. because I'm convincing myself I'm fine with this, and I don't know that I'm fine with this. My oldest kid is going to the UK tonight for 5 months. She's never been out of the country. She's never traveled by herself. And she is going to go study abroad at the University of Sussex, about an hour south of London. Won't come home until May 31st. And I'm telling myself I'm okay with this. But I don't know that I'm okay with this. And I know I'll be okay. And I know she'll be fine. But, I mean, why pray when I can worry? And I worry. And I worry about her being gone and us while she's being gone and what happens if something happens. And I realize my passport was expired and I'm trying to rush getting it renewed just in case something happens. I don't like this stage of life. You know, a lot of people love it when their kids are little and, oh, they're so much fun and stuff. Yeah, but, I mean, they wake up in the middle of the night and you got to wipe their butt and they can't feed themselves. They can't take care of themselves. And it can be just exhausting. You're working a full-time job. I remember when my kid was 5 and he said the cute. Yeah, mine said cute stuff too. But it was also very annoying and exhausting having to entertain them all the time. And then they hit teenagers and my kids, gosh, I love to hang out with them. We watch movies together. We go to restaurants together. We travel together. We have fun. We go do stuff. We shoot guns together. We play golf together. And now one of them is going to be gone. For 5 months, gone. And then I worry. I mean, what happens? What if something bad happens? She's going to the UK and all the problems in the UK right now. And I know intellectually, I know she'll be fine. And I also know, like I got to give the worries to God. But I worry. So prayer is appreciated. We're going to take her to the airport tonight and hang out with her until she gets on the plane. And they don't really make it. You know, they used to be able to go through the terminal before 9/11, and you could actually sit at the gate with your family until you got on the plane. Not anymore. You got it's just kind of it's not very drop off your family friendly at the Atlanta airport now. So we'll go hang out for a while somewhere close and then drop her off and let her go. And I knew this day would come where you have to let your kid go away by themselves, and it's here today. And I don't like it at all. I really don't like it. I guess I'll just have to suck it up, though. Prayers appreciated.